session. She's CEO of the World Green Building Council. She's graduated in economics from University of Los Andes in Bogota. She has a master in international relationship and economics from Johns Hopkins University. Formerly, she was also CEO of Colombia Green Building Council and also has expertise in the fields of economic research, journalism, and international affairs. Please.
Thank you so much. Okay, good afternoon. I'm gonna be addressing the topic from the perspective of the work of the World Green Building Council. We're one of the largest global action networks in the built environment. We have green building councils in almost 70 countries, including GBC España. We represent almost 40,000 companies worldwide with 900 staff. And we are happy to show here more actions, more than diagnosis, because we know what to do now. How do we scale up? So we're very happy to co-author also the building section of the roadmap to decarbonization that is presented today. Thank you very much for that opportunity. My staff was in the meeting in Milan. It was very interesting to have that conversation of business action networks and having a collaboration with the academic community, but also that voice going forward with actionable solutions. So as I said, I'm here to present the progress of the World Green Building Council and how we are moving to take us to a net zero economy. So we've heard from the previous speakers of the problems we face. The buildings and construction sector is responsible for a very significant amount of carbon emissions and resource consumption globally, and that's not gonna stop. And it's gonna grow exponentially, actually, and most of it in developing countries. Additionally, since we spend 90% of our time indoors, I don't know if you've realized here the lack of natural light and the effect it has on our health. Buildings do affect how we feel, do affect through air quality levels, both externally inside our buildings. Air pollution is pretty much also understood that it does come from the unsustainability of our buildings. We have a good long way to go for the next COP. Hopefully it will be called the Net Zero COP, as I'm hearing. There's only 68 countries that have building energy codes. That is slowly not changing. It's a very hard process, so the business side of things, the business action, that inspires also policy leadership. I was so inspired by the presentation today from Rosario in Argentina. If we would like any city to act, that's the roadmap, and it addresses most of the barriers and the solutions we were seeing in the previous presentations. We have the long way to go. I was trying to say also that the national determined contributions, the NDCs around buildings, the commitments that countries do around buildings, and the Paris Agreement are really poor. And it's not that that's going to be the solution, but as we know, the right policy signal is very important for us to know that that's the direction we're heading, that it's unequivocal, and so business can invest according to that vision. So I don't have to say much here about this audience that buildings are a critical solution to climate change. It is one of the biggest contributors to the problem, but also represents one of the biggest opportunities as we're seeing. And importantly, it has to be about people, our human health, improving sustainability in buildings. So my voice here is that we need to act now, fully decarbonize the building sector. We know how to do it. The vision of the possible is there, both energy used in operation in buildings, but also emissions from materials and construction. And I would like to say a little bit also on the solutions addressed here. I guess the green building movement has come a long way. It's not new, right? I think we've evolved in understanding that those very high-end architecture solutions that didn't speak to other disciplines, right, had to learn head-on what is integrative design to minimize the negative impact a building has in the environment. What we're seeing now through the net zero carbon pathways is that we need is to think about whole life cycle. It's not enough to build and go. We have to understand the operations phase. We have to understand and track data, and we have to address critically head-on embodied carbon or upfront emissions. This roadmap also is because buildings do provide us an opportunity to connect with other sectors, and as we've seen in this conference, there's a lot of potential and power to integrate the buildings and transport systems, send the right demand signals of industry for decarbonization and reduce overall energy consumption, or otherwise, of course, make it more efficient and green, and of course, facilitate the renewable energy transition. Sustainable development goals are totally interlinked with the decarbonization agenda, and green buildings are, the built environment overall is one of the most effective ways to address the SDGs. And our network across the world, across the almost 70 countries we operate on, are totally focused on supporting how we create buildings, green buildings for everyone, everywhere, so we can enable a built environment that helps people to thrive and not cost us the earth. I would also say that we have been working on pathways to achieve net zero carbon target goals. So one of the key programs, and that let's say we supported the roadmap with, it's called Advancing Net Zero. Advancing Net Zero basically is how to accelerate the uptake of net zero carbon buildings. It's a project framework that incorporates target dates according to the climate science. As we know, fully decarbonized by 2050, it doesn't mean that we act by 2050, we have to act today. And we know that to get there, all new buildings have to be decarbonized or by 2030. Our definition of net zero carbon buildings are, as now it's standard, highly energy efficient, with all remaining energy coming from on-site or off-site renewables. We do have 4 action pathways that we believe are gonna get us there, and as I said, measure and disclose in operation. That's a full change on mindset in the sector. Reduce energy demand through energy efficiency to reach decarbonization faster. Generate a balance from renewable sources, on-site, off-site, and offset where appropriate, as a last resort, of course. But importantly, over time, increase and include other sustainability impacts, such as embodied carbon, waste, and water. Where are we at? We have been really working hard to improve standards around countries around the world. So using our framework, we have right now at least 10 markets that are deploying net zero carbon solutions to understand what it means for their local reality, their market, but also addresses how to move the industry quicker. For example, the UK Green Building Council recently launched a framework encouraging whole life cycle approach, including emissions both from operational and embodied, and also other schemes in our European GBCs. In Australia, Green Building Council, it's really interesting. Now they have a performance pathway for positive carbon buildings. It's not even net zero, it's positive, permitting their conversation to be one of the most progressive markets in the world in this sense. The US Green Building Council is let's say, the owner of the LEED brand, which is very popular. They also have now, as a result of our collaboration in this program, of a LEED Zero pathway. And in Singapore, the focus is also shifting towards achieving super low energy buildings that are prepared and future-proofed through a decarbonized grid. Oh, that went all the way forward. Oh, no, that's it, sorry. I tried to do slides with less text, so I got confused. We have a great report that was launched in July. It's called the Advancing Net Zero Report. And here we are flagging the key progress in what we're delivering. We have 28 cities that have committed to net zero carbon visions. This week, Helsinki, through our commitment, committed to net zero by 2035. So those dates are rolling forward. The state of California also signed our commitment, and that will include decarbonizing 16 million buildings, and they are committed to enacting regulation to meet their targets. And municipalities that have been signing are also committed to decarbonizing their own buildings. So every actor can do something about it, and that's how we're moving this topic forward. I would like to mention that in Europe, there's a program that we are collaborating with the European Commission. It's called Build Upon 2. It's funded by the EU Horizon 2020. We are working in 8 cities in Spain, including Valladolid, and they are going to comply with the EU Directive for Energy Performance, and we're collaborating with the Global Covenant of Mayors, so they address the retrofit challenge in Europe. So their codes are there, right? They're great. Nobody uses them. So we're working on how to deploy that. We're working in 8 cities in Europe. By 2021, we commit to have 10 more. So it's going to be 18. So it's how to implement those local effectiveness in codes. And that is going to mean that we are going to have indoor air quality, comfort, particularly for people that are addressing energy poverty through the bad homes we have across the regions, but addressing areas where also no new building is going to happen. We're working also on that. Our Green Building Council of España also is taking on government action. They're leading let's say, those conversations here, and you're going to find there the examples of those cities taking action going forward, and you can read more there. And thankfully, I'm addressing the report because there's no time. Finally, there has to be a marriage between the operational and embodied, as we said. And we know by 85 endorsers of our embodied carbon report that the vision of decarbonizing the upfront emissions can happen by 2030, slashing by 40%. And then that way, we will start talking about a whole life cycle of buildings and realize a vision of how to address also circularity in materials and be effective in this journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Cristina. So the next speaker is Isidoro Miranda.